Well, yes. Welcome, everyone. So excited to be here. I'm Mike Magee. I'm the president of Minerva University. We are, as a university, so excited to be one of the sponsors of the summit today. Many of you may not know about our university. We're only 12 years old. For the last 4 years, we have been ranked the #1 in the world university rankings for innovation. So we know a little bit about innovation and entrepreneurship, and over 7 graduating classes, 12% of our graduates have founded their own funded companies and organizations. So very, very proud of the entrepreneurs that we're producing at Minerva University, and all of that to say this is a topic which is of great interest to me and to Minerva University, and we have an extraordinary panel today to talk about the role that story playing plays in successful entrepreneurship, and I couldn't imagine a better panel for us in this regard. So I just want to introduce those are the 3 panelists who are here, and I hope our 4th panelist joins us, but if he doesn't make it for some reason, that's okay. So we have 3 currently co-founders and leaders of incredible companies. Cal Henderson is here as co-founder and CTO of Slack, which you may have heard of. We have Mada Seghete here, who is the co-founder of Upside and CEO. And Sampriti Bhattacharyya as co-founder and CEO of Navier. And Sung Cho, who's founder and CEO of Chartmetric. So a great group, a diverse group of companies, real success stories in the startup space. And I think we're going to have a great conversation today. So thank you for joining us for the day and for this conversation. I wanted to start with a question for all of you, maybe, which is there are the great products and strategies that we create, and then there are the stories that we tell about them. I wonder if you could tell us about an instance where the storytelling was what mattered most, where the product or the strategy was not going to sell itself, and you had to tell a great story in order to move people to fund or to get behind your company in a way that you really needed them to. So Mada, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think for me, the founding stories, I think to get people to invest in you and be early customers, like the product is never enough. So much of it is telling your story and finding a way to resonate. So, my current company is Upside, but the way Upside was built was from a problem I faced deeply at my previous company branch. And I really struggled. I was the founder, but I was also a CMO. We grew to over 100 million in revenue. And as we were going up market, it was just really hard for me to understand what works. And I basically got fired by my co-founder as the CMO. And I moved into an evangelist role. And it was a very shameful thing for me to admit. I, really thought of myself and my identity around like my role in the company. So having to move to a different role because I couldn't prove like the value of the work that I was doing and my team was doing was really hard for me. But that's something that like drove me to build an internal tool that measured and got better insights in like B2B attribution. And then it's what drove me to start my new company, Upside. I did end up like basically back into the role, and because I had this internal tool, I was able to like really like build relationships with other people, gain the respect of the head of sales and other like execs that then said, hey, you should stay as CMO. So it really changed, like the problem, the story did come with me going through this really hard thing and then solving it for myself and then starting a company. So when it was very hard for me to admit like the fact that I was fired and I failed, and like I think leading with vulnerability and telling my story ended up like actually like going viral and getting a lot of our like early customers at Upside. And that's been like a very interesting way to like really understand that when you actually open up and tell the real story, other people have the same problem. Like everyone in B2B go-to-market and marketing is struggling to understand what works. And when they actually see someone being vulnerable, it resonates to them. And so we got a lot of inbound and a lot of, most of our early customers came from me sharing that story.
Thank you. Sampriti, you have a company making products that seem to me like they should sell themselves, but I imagine storytelling is still really important to what you're doing.
I'll go back a little bit into the past. Actually, when Semyon and I met, he knows me from grad school at MIT. So I think, I never think of the word like storytelling. I think, I feel when you see the vision, you live it like it's your reality. And when you're able to say it like you live it because it's so real to you, I think that's what helps you to connect with people. So it's not like I ever had to write a story that, hey, how the world will change. It just, it comes to you, you see it, and then you bring forward that vision. So, back in grad school, how this all came about, doing maritime stuff. I used to be an aerospace engineer, aerospace and nuclear. So then at MIT, I started building underwater drones, some of the world's first underwater small drones, and they were meant for going into nuclear reactors and monitoring them. It's cool, but may not be that exciting to many people. I like robots, so that was cool. But it was the journey, me getting into maritime was when Malaysian airline got lost. And, everyone's talking about how robots taking over the world, we are going to Mars, we are going to moon, we are mining asteroid. And I am there thinking, wait, I'm in the basement lab. I still remember this news where like everywhere in the TV and they were doing search. And it was March 2014, I think. I was just so amazed that there's an airplane with hundreds of people lost in the ocean, and we just don't know how to find it. And that was very eye-opening. That was a defining moment in my life that I was like, wow, the physics of the problem, if you find the black box, you should be able to track that signal. You need a distributed sensor network. And then I was just thinking in my head how to make that happen. And then I was like, well, we already have aerial drones. Somebody should be putting underwater drones to find it. And then I was like, well, why someone? Why not me? I'm just building an underwater drone anyway, right? We often don't ask, we often think about somebody solving that problem, but sometimes we don't say, why not me? I do have the skills to do it. And that was really, the moment of seeing that how big, the world 70%, the final frontier is unexplored, unknown, and is our future. The future of trade, food, technology depends on it. So fast forward, I think, the IP went to a prime defense contractor, prime defense company. I did not get anything out of it. But I think my conviction still stayed with me, right? And I knew that, there is a huge opportunity to build the next generation American maritime company. The technology and everything was in space. So I think for me, the story of Malaysian airline, obviously people could relate to. But, added to that, it's basically, in whatever I inferred from that, where the world should go, if it makes sense in my head, that's basically the story and the reality that I convey to others.
Was that sense of having a problem that you were passionate about solving, did that carry over to the moment when you needed to attract investors to your new company?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I'll tell you this much, that, today defense sector is very hot. Think about 10 years ago, right? I was the only one building, nobody was doing ocean stuff. I was probably the few, right? I was doing stuff in defense when the VCs were like, oh, defense cycle is so cyclic, we will never invest. The same VCs who are probably today are super patriotic, oh my gosh, ocean stuff, shipbuilding and all that, right? I have probably 100 emails that say, oh, this is way too outside our thing. America did not need maritime any less than it needs now. So I think even 5 years ago, it wasn't that easy. But one thing I would say that I do not change my story because of hype. That is, I'm very strong about. If I have a conviction, like I never change my story to say, hey, I'm a hot defense company. And when people were like, why are you building a luxury boat? You should build a defense company. I was like, look, I've worked on nuclear reactors and physics. I did not start a company to build luxury boats. But I do have the conviction in the way and my path, the way I want to do it. And that makes sense, logical sense in my head. So one thing I would say, I do not change story because there is a market trend or hype, because I don't think hype would ever ride the high tides.
Thank you. Sung-Cho, you're at this very interesting intersection of music and data and regional trends. I'm curious about how you leverage your own story and storytelling to translate things that are happening regionally that you want to take globally.
Yeah, sure. I love this topic, storytelling. You guys get reminded constantly that you have to tell, deliver good stories, but it's always hard. I think it has to be personal in the end. And I've tried many different stories in my 10 years journey. By the way, we are in the music industry. As Michael just said, we track the data about the artists. We are tracking about 13 million artists in the world and more than 130 million tracks every day. Their stats and updates and which playlists and which radio stations. So in the music industry, to operate in this industry with this topic of data instead of gut feel, you have to persuade these people. So for me, the stories that I've used a lot was, my background. As a Korean immigrant entrepreneur coming into this industry that I don't have any background with. I was in the gaming industry before, worked at Oracle as a product manager, so nothing to do with music. I knew how to play the piano a little bit, but that was it, or singing. But really not so much into the music industry. But I was a data person, a product person. But what I said was, what I see, the trend back in 2015 or 14, when music was becoming more global, hugely thanks to Spotify and later Apple Music. Now, people didn't have to make a very deliberate decision to purchase a $15, $20 worth CDs. Now, or purchasing still, even if it's 99 cents, still it's a very involved decision to purchase. You don't want to screw that $1. So people were very, very afraid of trying new music or new things. But 2015-14 was the year when things were changing, thanks to Spotify subscription. People began to explore. So Korean music, one of those. K-pop music was one of those things that people began to explore. BTS or Blackpink were becoming more and more popular. But I didn't. I knew that something was happening. If Korean music is becoming popular globally, then means that other types of music, German music, Scandinavian, or African, or most importantly, Latin music will also become more global, which is what happened. We've seen Luis Fonsi moment and Annual, Daddy Yankee. These are like global, the massive, the most popular artists in the world. Plus, all these K-pop moments also happened with Demon Hunters. Now we got so tired of that Demon Hunters songs. So, So that's what I tell people. Okay, you guys have the gut feeling, but did you know that Afrobeat will become this popular? Your own listening habits or your own area, you may miss the next big artists, real important trends. So we are here to track those global trends. Any bedroom artists can also become very popular in another country. And I think some popular, like examples that we quote is how Love, L-A-U-V, Love. Yeah. He became popular in Philippines, in Asia, quite popular first. And with that, he gained so many followers and then monthly listeners. And now he began to get plugged into so many global playlists and he became much more popular. So these are the cities such as Manila in Philippines or Mexico City in Mexico or Sao Paulo. Some of these massively metropolitan cities, they play a huge role these days in globalizing the music because they contribute a lot to YouTube view counts or Spotify monthly listeners, and they gain those numbers. Not necessarily money. They don't translate to a huge amount of money right away, but that's how these days artists, instead of one small city in the UK and then become massively popular and then, with huge marketing dollars behind, labels, big labels, pour money, and then radio stations. That used to be the way, but that still happens. But now it's a different game. Yeah. So.
That's just a quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
I asked this as a father of a daughter who is a creative artist with about 125,000 followers on TikTok and growing. She thinks as an artist of just growing her own fan base and not having to go through more institutional channels. And it strikes me that you have all of the data, but you probably have to do some convincing still to tell the story about trends that you're seeing in the data and how the world is changing. So what is that like explaining to people, including investors, about the trends that you're seeing, the forecasting that you might be doing, and convincing them of the future that you're seeing kind of before your eyes?
Yeah, true. So a lot of artists think that way, and that's has been the trend in the last couple of years. TikTok, especially playing a huge role in how people discover new music these days. So the way we describe, how we persuade is not by discounting their expertise, this like 10 decades of expertise and good eyes, good ears. And of course, artists, they also, good music is one thing, but for the longevity, like artists who have long career, they also know how to engage with fans. So they learn how to do that on their own, or they have some good managers who manage their Instagram or TikTok accounts. But in terms of the labels, who need to make a big bet, this is like venture capital game. You make a $3 million bet without really knowing whether this artist can really produce the next big album or not. But you still need to make a bet before making that very important, costly decision. Of course, they want to check in case this is a fad, just one-time fad, or some artists, they can also, anyone can purchase follower accounts on Instagram. You can purchase 5,000 followers for $10. So those things you want to filter out. So we are not necessarily validating. Okay, according to the data, this is the artist that you have to sign. Instead of that, in case, you don't want to make a mistake here. So how about you go and check the data? And you're right, your gut feel may be right, but just in case that you miss something, there's a data that the chances are we've been tracking this artist for a couple months already. So if the artist gained huge number of fans on Instagram on like overnight, that's quite visible on the platform. The artists may come to you claiming that I have 1 million followers on Instagram, but what if, you have 0 followers on TikTok? That's strange. So does this artist have that traction across different social media platforms these days? Those are the things that those are the type of data we have. So I think I've heard many stories from record label executives, how they try to persuade other people, not to sign this artist, but they went ahead. But according to the data, they should not have signed. But later it turned out to be a mistake. Some of these, it's quite satisfying to hear, gratifying.
Thank you. Cal, Slack has obviously been a solution for companies, but it also, I think, was a prediction about how companies would behave in the future. Can you take us back to those early days and the story that you all were telling about Slack and how you inspired people to invest in the idea?
Yeah, I think my background is a software engineer, and so I'd like to believe something you said earlier, which is, this product, you build a product and it sells itself. I think that is very narrowly true for certain kinds of things that people make, certain kinds of products and services. If you're a material scientist and you make a particular grade of steel that people are looking for, it's like, yeah, that sells itself. It's this tensile, it's this weight, it's this much cost. If you make nuts and bolts, people buy them on their merit and it sells itself. No software products or services that we make sell themselves in any way. People don't shop for things in that way. Nobody was saying, I want exactly this tool for my workplace. I'm looking for these 59 features, and I'm willing to pay this much, and what's out there. Nobody really buys or shops that way. And it is instead, we're looking to solve particular problems, or we have a problem and we don't even know if there's a solution for it. It's something that we're feeling. There's something more that we want to be. There's some way that we want to act, and that's how we sell modern products and services. We create a vision of the future that if you buy my software, you will be able to do this thing. You'll be able to feel this way. You'll be able to operate in this manner, and that's all storytelling. Even in the best case with the software product, like Slack in the early days, a lot of our growth was peer-to-peer. It was somebody who is using Slack at their company recommending it to one of their friends so that they pick it up and use it at their company. And for that to happen, you need to also be able to set up your product in such a way that people are able to tell a story about it to somebody else about why they would use it. I think this is something that we struggled with for years, both in how we describe and explain the product ourselves and how we enable our customers to explain it to each other. I'm sure you've had this experience of you use something and you think it's amazing and you try and describe it to other people or try and say why it's so good, and the kind of what you ultimately say is, oh, you just have to try it. Once you try it, you'll get it and it'll be great. That's great if you do, but is very bad from like a how do you market something point of view. How do you make sure you're able to tell a story in a short, coherent way that people understand the problem that you're solving, understand why this is a good solution and why you should try this particular solution. And so storytelling was very important. Telling the story of why you would want to use a product like Slack. At the time when we started, we weren't really replacing any other tool like it that people were using. There were some out there. There was a bunch of people who were using HipChat, and some people had used Campfire years before that, or IRC 20 years before that. But relatively speaking, none of our customers were using a product like Slack. They were using email, they were using Skype, they were using SMS, they were talking to each other in person. And it was how can we tell them a story about why this is a kind of thing that would be good, why they could work in a different way, why the world is changing as well. And so sometimes it's how do you attach your vision of what you're doing to other trends that are happening, in adjacent industries. Or for us, it was attaching to the trend of how people were messaging and communicating in their personal lives, with the rise of messengers on smartphones, on the rise of social network messengers. And this is how you've moved from, emailing your friends to texting with your friends. Why haven't we made that move in the workplace yet? Imagine if you were able to make that same transition, in the workplace, and it felt as modern as communicating with your friends does. And figuring out what the hook is that resonates with people. We get this whole idea of vitamins and painkillers. What was vitamin is something that you do because it's good for you. Painkiller is, something you have an acute pain. How do you solve that? a lot of products are vitamins, but you need to find an angle of why they're a painkiller, why they solve a problem that you're having right now. And if you can, a lot of people have a lot of problems. Like there's many things that we can solve in our lives. And how do you find the right thing to attach to that resonates with people? What is a struggle that they're having right now? What's something that feels kind of universal to them? And like, oh yeah, that is a problem that we have as an organization, that I have as a person, that I could solve, with some kind of product. And it was convincing people that the way that ultimately the way that you're working right now, it could be better. You could be communicating better with the people that you're working with, and we're going to solve that problem for you.
Curious, Cal, just as a follow-up, obviously COVID put work from home on steroids. But was that something you all were already seeing around the corner? Were there trends that you were already articulating about why Slack would be valuable and help to solve people's problems?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Slack, we were already quite a few years old when the pandemic happened, and we already had, millions, tens of millions of people using Slack every day. I think it was, as terrible as it obviously was, it was very lucky timing for us. And I think what we saw when especially in the March and April of 2020 was just a big acceleration in a change that was already happening. And I think the general trend had been work had been getting more complex. More work involved more people working together. Work was becoming more collaborative. We saw in pre-2020 very few fully distributed companies that didn't have an office, but an increasing number of medium and large organizations that are multinational. And if there's not a huge difference between having 3 offices around the US and having people all work from their homes. It is like logistically obviously pretty different, but like from a coordination point of view, it still becomes very difficult to coordinate those people and work together across different offices. We as a company had been, it's funny, prior to the pandemic, we weren't really a remote work company. We all worked in offices. It's just we happened to have 3 offices in different cities. And so we weren't pro remote work. I didn't think it could ever really work, and was quite a remote work skeptic. And then the pandemic happened and showed actually that was fine. Many other problems, but we could continue to work well. And that set of tools was there, but it was really because work was already becoming more distributed, more complex, and with higher coordination cost. And I think as more and more work has become knowledge work, has become more collaborative, I think that's a broad trend that was already happening. It's not like we influenced that trend. We would just happen to have the right solution at a time when that was already happening. And I think a lot of both how you design successful products, successful services, is a lot of understanding what are the trends that are already happening that you think are going to continue and that you can tell a story around or attach to that trend. It's like, if this thing continues, there's going to be this need, and can you get there a bit ahead of that happening?
Thank you. I want to switch topics a little bit, although this isn't a nice segue, Cal. I'm thinking about the fact that 85% of our students at Minerva University are non-U.S. students, non-U.S. citizens. We really believe in the power of building a community that is globally diverse. All of the work that our students do on the learning side is collaborative in that way, and I think it's just so much more powerful as a result. So I'm curious both about how you all are telling your personal stories of immigration or arrival in the U.S., what that has meant to you, how it's driven you, how it's enabled you to found the companies that you have, but also about whether you're telling stories around the power of diverse teams, which, as we've already heard today, can be an extraordinary engine for innovation. So whether it's the teams you're building around a globally diverse population of talented people, or your personal story of your journey to the U.S., how are you leveraging that from a storytelling perspective to build your companies? Yeah, please start.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a pretty unusual path, to coming to America and building of all the things, maritime company, and now, across the water in Alameda, you see a hangar full of boats getting integrated in factories and all that stuff. But it was a pretty jagged path, right? I grew up in India, went to, I would say, a rather teeny-weeny college, and my path was, well, you graduate. Back then, women were getting into workforce a little bit more. I did not grow up seeing that. And there was the whole IT boom that was happening. So, well, people were getting recruited for like being at call centers and such kind of things, right? And my story to America and why it also why I feel so strongly about what I'm building is. When I was 16, we just got cable TV, and I was saw the Apollo mission as a documentary in Discovery Channel. I was just blown away by the fact that people somewhere in America, have the audacity to just leave this planet, go beyond, literally and figuratively reach out for the moon, as I say it. And, that was my picture of America, New York and NASA. And when I was about 20, we just got our first computer at home. I know it seems crazy because your kids grow up with computers, right? And internet at home. And I learned something about, things like an internship. And long story short, one in several hundreds of email took me on my first airplane ride ever with $200, and I came to America to work on an internship in a high-energy physics lab. That was the first time I went anywhere alone. I mean, I grew up, in India, where it's fairly conservative. You just, stay pretty protected. And I think this country, is incredible, right? I mean, you come here, in a sense, you start with nothing. But if you work really hard, not all things are fair. I mean, I have, faced my own fair share of things where I felt, well, that's not fair. There's biases. There is this and that. But I think when you grow up in India, when you have a much more global perspective how things are, you come to appreciate this country. Because if you work really hard, you can make things happen. Maybe, when you're building something audacious like a next generation maritime company or something equivalent to SpaceX, obviously, most people won't believe in you. And that's just the nature of what you're doing. When you don't fit in, right? I mean, just let's put it this way. When you see a boat, right? How many times have you ever seen, maybe most people don't follow boating magazine or whatever, but how many times you have ever seen a boating magazine with a woman on the helm? Never. Forget a woman running a boat or a shipyard company, but I think these kind of personal story also inspires people, right? Because there's a lot of people who believe that if I can create that data point, right, it opens up opportunities for many other people. And I think that that has been a very important thing in my journey, to share that story, whether that's, coming to America from pretty much a community college, making my way to MIT, and building this. It seems like I had to do a lot of impossible things, and that also gives me some credibility that I do have a track record of pulling off some pretty impossible and crazy things. So it does help a bit, I guess. I don't give up. I do have a track record of not giving up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, please. I mean, it reminds me that so often, I think especially with immigrant entrepreneurs in the U.S., those entrepreneurs are also pioneers who trailblaze and create pathways for people to follow behind them. I only know of one other next-gen maritime company. It's called Seabound, and it happens to have been founded by two Minerva University alumni who are women who came from rural China and Sweden to San Francisco. So hopefully you're all part of a big new trend. Mada, you talked about telling vulnerable stories about your journey. Does that include your immigrant experience and the stories that you tell about it?
Honestly, I probably should tell my story more. I think sometimes when you feel like you're a minority and you tend to not bring that up too much. You want to fit in. So talking about how you're different and, talking about the fact that I also grew up in a small town in Romania during communism, it's not something that I've probably talked enough. And I think the other thing that, for me, being an immigrant, I had a lot of legal issues. So my H-1B, when my first company first applied, got denied. My green card got denied, all for credit card issues. I ended up going to business school because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay in this country, and I've been here 10 years, and I don't know what to do with my life if I have to leave. Then I found out, after I got into Stanford Business School, I found out that I actually couldn't go unless I got the green card, because it's very hard to get a student visa once you've applied. So it feels like a lot of my life has been actually shaped by issues with immigration. And I think I've been scared to talk about it, because I think in the current regime and in general, talking about your challenges with immigration and being identifying as an immigrant is not always perceived well. And I've done this the same with being a woman founder. I'm like, no, I'm a founder. And I think talking about diversity is important. It's important to be in a diverse group of people, but it's also important to find your community of people who are similar to you and have the same struggles. So, for me, I think the two main things have been being an immigrant and being a woman founder. And I think it took me a long time during Branch to look for those communities, and I struggled with mental health issues because I felt so alone. So when I found a group of women founders who were also struggling, and it really changed my life. So I started actually this female founder retreat to help other women find their small group of people they trust that are going through the same issues. And I also had a group of immigrant friends who helped me through the really hard time when I didn't know if I could stay in this country or not. So I think when I talk about when you build a team of work, diversity is so important. And my current co-founders and my co-founders were all dudes, but they are also they were homeschooled. They have their own diverse way of thinking about things. But I think it's very important that while diversity is very important in a team, finding your lookalikes for your own mental health, and being able to go to someone and be like, I'm really struggling with this, and they're like, man, I get it, I also struggle with this, this is how I'm facing it. I think that's also important, and I think that's not maybe talked about enough. And I think I love that the summit is here and happening, because I think finding lookalikes that you can rely on when things are hard are important.
Cal, thank you, Mada. Cal, I'm curious for your thoughts on what we heard from both Sampriti and Mada, that on the one hand, the U.S. might still be a pretty extraordinary engine for entrepreneurship. On the other hand, we're in a moment where we're facing challenges for many, many people's immigration journeys, and for any effort to build diverse teams successfully and sustain them. How does that square with your experience? How does it align with your own immigration story? And how do you think about these things these days?
Yeah, I think ultimately I'm very optimistic for the future. I think that ultimately it will prove out that building diverse teams builds better products and ultimately better companies, even if the trend is maybe in the opposite direction right now. And so I will still continue to stick to my values through this era of the US. Where my Slack co-founders, I'm originally British. We have an American, a Canadian, and a Russian. So we are a very diverse set of white men from all around the world. And so I'm an immigrant, but I also don't, are in the luckiest segment of immigrants to the US that rarely gets treated in the same way that a lot of immigrants do. So I recognize that I have a lot of privilege there, and so should use that more to help support other immigrants, moving to the US. And regardless of kind of what's happening right now, it is still absolutely the best place in the world to be building any kind of technology company. And, it's kind of, I do a lot of kind of investing in the UK and Europe still. And it is so much of what I do working with other European founders is figuring out how to get them to move here and to operate their businesses here. It is still such a huge advantage to have access to a single massive market with huge purchasing power, and that I moved here accidentally, really. I moved to Canada accidentally and then came down here accidentally, and never really had any plan. All I like to do is make software, and it turns out that I lucked into being in the best place in the world to do it. But when I was a kid growing up in the UK, being an entrepreneur wasn't particularly a thing that people ever talked about. There weren't examples of entrepreneurs. It wasn't a path that people took. It was a very strange thing to do. And so it was never something I aspired to. I just wanted to make software. And I fell into it. But seeing both that is much more of an aspirational thing now. Many kids, I have young kids, and they grow up thinking that they could start a company, that's a normal thing that people would do, which is great. And I recognize they're also growing up in the Bay Area, so they have a somewhat unique perspective. But that is an opportunity, and that is something that's being talked about all around the world, and encouraging people and supporting them to be able to go down that path, whether that is moving to the US, whether it is figuring out how you operate a business in other parts of the world and take advantage of the US as a market, I think is really important. I think the kind of getting back to storytelling briefly, yeah, as our topic here, I think I still am software engineer, as a technical co-founder. And I thought for a little while, all I'd ever need to do is be good at writing code. And it turns out the most important role as any kind of founder, whether you're technical, whatever discipline you're in, is sales. Sales for all the various meanings of sales. It is sales to go out and find customers, obviously, and sell your product, but it is sales to sell your vision and your company to potential investors. It is sales to recruit people, especially early on. And the most important skill there is telling a story about why what you're doing is important, why it matters, why it's aligned to what somebody wants to get out of their career or do with their life. And especially recruiting early on, before you have a product, certainly before you have any kind of success or scale, convincing people to come and work with you, to give up what they're doing, their sensible, well-paid job that's like secure, to come join this company that might not be around in 6 months or a year, might not ever be successful, might not ever ship a product. If it does ship a product, it might not ever, grow enough and be sustainable. That skill is incredibly important. And it, through the early growth years of Slack, it was a year where I spent 2/3 of all of my time on recruiting, when we 5x the headcount in 6 months or something like that. And that is not a skill that came naturally to me. My background as a technologist, I'm very good at not talking to people and looking at a computer screen for 10 hours a day. And talking to people it turns out, is a very different skill. But it's totally learnable, and it is. If you want to be a successful leader in any kind of discipline, it's something that you need to get good at, and you get good at it by practicing. I wish kind of that I'd recorded, the first interviews I did with people trying to recruit them to Slack back when nobody had ever heard of Slack, and we didn't have any customers yet. I was terrible at it, I'm sure. I'm incredibly lucky that we managed to convince some great people to join at that stage. But sharpening that skill first in recruiting, then in fundraising, and eventually actually with customers, just practicing it. I feel like by the time I left Slack, I left a little while ago, but I was there 15 years. I spent a lot of time with our big customers doing sales, sales supporting functions. And it's just a skill you can learn, and anybody can learn it. It doesn't matter if you're, like an introverted nerd like myself, you can eventually learn to do it, and it will make you more successful in all aspects of what you're doing. Every founder, every leader needs to be good at telling a story and convincing people of whether it's to join you, to buy your product, to whatever it is, be friends with you. It is a useful skill in life.
So true. So Sung-Cho, we have residential programs and campuses in Tokyo and Seoul and Taipei, and I spend a fair amount of time in those places. And one of the things that strikes me is in all of those cities, there's a robust conversation about the need to attract talented people from all over the world to companies.
Yes.
And as Cal just reminded us, that's a really important storytelling skill. Immigration policy, of course, plays a big role in all of this as well. And all of those places, as with the United States, is, I think, facing challenges around making immigration policy amenable to attracting really talented people from around the world to your companies. But there's also just the nuts and bolts task of convincing individual people to come join you in your effort. What has that been like for you? How have you leveraged your own immigrant story to make that happen?
Yeah, looks like we only have a couple of minutes left.
Yes.
So I'll keep it short. I 100% agree with what Kyle said, the storytelling or sales in the end to convince people to work with you. When you don't have much money, when you don't have much to show, that reminds me of my first employee at Chartmetric. He originally came from Taiwan, Tsinghua University, and went to Stanford for a grad school. Graduating from that school, you could easily command in this area 120K minimum to 100 and even like 50K in big corporations. I only raised, this is kind of a bootstrapped company, only raised 200K initially from angel investors, only friends and family. So I didn't have that 150K to give to him. So we sat down together and I posted a job on AngelList without any hope. Everyone else is offering 120K for new grads or 150K. I would never be able to attract a good engineer. I thought as a single entrepreneur, I didn't have a technical co-founder, so I had to recruit someone smart. In the Bay Area, when every other company is paying so much, it seemed impossible for a nobody. Also as an immigrant entrepreneur. But surprisingly, one trick for me was to raise the equity portion on AngelList from 3 to 10% equity. So almost like, co-founder, but salary didn't, I posted like 30K. I didn't expect anything. But this guy, he showed up in my office and said, I don't care that much about the cash portion. I live in Mountain View, pay $1,000 for rent with my roommate, each $1,000. And I don't have a car. I can bike to work. I was using an office in Palo Alto for free, thanks to my friend in venture capital. So he offered, and then we agreed on like I think the initial was $4,000 a month, and he agreed, and we began working together. I paid myself $3,000 a month, and then our burn was so low, and we kept it that way for 1 year, and that. What I'm trying to tell is Silicon Valley, extremely expensive place and extremely difficult to hire quality talents. But what attracts this attracts the special type of people who are aspirational. Money. As long as I can do some grocery shopping, I want to build something different and build something interesting, and I want to learn. And that's what he told me. I'm signing up for this. He was working for another company, but he moved in 2 weeks later, and he asked me some challenging questions as an entrepreneur, as an immigrant. Do you think you can do it? Actually, he directly asked me that question. I haven't seen many of these, and then you're an immigrant. Can you be a CEO, build a company? So I shared my story at that moment, my childhood, even going back, and he got persuaded. He joined, helped me for 3-4 years, build his prototype and make the company profitable. We didn't raise much since, and then we became profitable in year 2, and then stayed that way since. And now we have 50 employees, about 12 million ARR. 12 million ARR. And then luckily, I was able to buy back his shares later, and then he made some money by selling his shares back to the company. With our profit, I was able to buy back his shares. And later, with this learning, he co-founded a company himself and got into YC, and later sold that company to ClickHouse. now he is playing an important role at ClickHouse. So he learned something, and I got something, and then like this type of meetings, I don't think would have happened easily in any other places. But here in America, in Silicon Valley, these kinds of meetings very. So I'm in general, as an immigrant entrepreneur, I'm so appreciative every day. I paid my fair share of taxes in a form of tuition when I went to UCLA. Got an MBA from there. But still, I gained so much from this. So,
thank you, Sangcho.
Yeah.
Sampriti, Mada, final thoughts for us about how you attract great people to your own teams and companies, and what stories you tell to make that happen.
We actually do this, I mean, we're early now, but we do a trial. So we have someone to come in and work with us for a week. So we tell the story, but getting them to come in and sit, and we pay them. So it's a work trial, but it's paid. And people just take time off from their current job, and they come and they do 3 to 5 days with us. And I think working together, not everyone works out, but after that trial, every single person wanted to work with us, because I think just coming to experience, I think part of it is the story is important, and to get them to the trial, you need to like sell them the story. But I think actually doing this trial helps us understand people better, and it gets them a real feel of the company. They get to sit in our stand-ups and hear the vision every day. So that's been very helpful. We were able to get the type of engineers that probably we couldn't have otherwise.
Final thoughts, Sampriti?
Yeah, I mean, taking them on a ride on a flying boat and and a factory tour helps. But no, really, I mean, I'll give one example. When I brought in Paul Beaker, who's a very famous, I mean, one of the godfathers of foiling, chief naval architect of Larry Ellison, and he's the lead naval architect of the boat. I think as Cal was saying, it's what does the world look like if you make this happen, right? If you close your eyes and you're part of this, and if you one day write a book, right? What role did you play, and what does the world look like as a result of this? Like something that did not exist before. For us, we say, the impact that railways, highways, roadways make. Look at the waterways. If we create that, fundamentally change how people and goods move through the water, how would you feel if you have been a part of creating the airlines or airplanes, right? Yeah. I think giving that picture of the future and what role they can specifically play to move that needle, I think it's not just the vision of the future, but their role in that. I think that's really important. And I think, that's where storytelling is useful.
Great words of wisdom to end our conversations. Thank you, Sampriti, and thank you to all of our panelists. This was great. I hope you all enjoyed it. If I know some of us will be hanging around, so if we can connect as the summit goes on. But very, very, very appreciative for this conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.